friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa Stringworks Workshop with another edition of Shop Talk. So far, I would say the vast majority of the feedback has been that they like the Shop Talk and that I should do more of them. And I think this particular Shop Talk might be the most valuable to date, possibly even maybe the most valuable video I've put out. It could be a long one, so you might want to go get your favorite beverage. Maybe get in your easy chair and kind of kick back. But before I do that, since everything is a hammer, I want to drop the hammer on a couple of comments that came from the last Shop Talk. The first one was fairly simple. He said that he was going to go watch paint dry after I got done with that one, apparently. So, I would assume that just meant that he was incredibly bored and didn't think it was worth his time. So I just didn't want him to be put out in the future, so I blocked him in the future, so he won't be able to make any more comments. The other comment that I blocked was, "You've lost all your humility. That's the reason we watch you, is because you're so humble and this and that, and you've completely let the stardom thing and the showbiz thing go to your head, and you've da-da-da-da-da." I just replied that said, well, I don't know what gave you that idea. I have no idea where you got that. I said, but I do agree with you one thing, because they said, they're out of here. I said, I do agree with you on that part. You're out of here. So I blocked them. Now, folks, just in case any of the rest of you feel that way, I have no clue what you're talking about. I'm the same person. My hat size is the same. It's always been. I put my shoes on the same way. Everything's the same. The only difference is I'm working 10 times more than I've ever worked in my life. I started answering emails and comments this morning at 3:30 in the morning. Today is Wednesday, April 29th for calendar purposes. Those of you who got my replies and emails and comments at 3:30 this morning up until now, you can vouch for that. It is now 6:30 in the morning and I'm in the shop. I have long work days, and I usually work in the shop at least until 5. Often go to short dinner, come back and work maybe till 9 or 10 in the evening. Go to bed, sleep about 3 to 4 hours, start answering emails again. That's kind of my life. If you think that gives you the big head, I'm sorry. I don't know how to help you. I get a lot of nice compliments, They pretty much go in one ear and out the other because I appreciate them, but, I realize you're just being nice and, it's just the way it is. But I take my share of totally ignorant comments too. Suffice it to say, on comments in the future, here's how I'm handling it. If the comment is just out and out rude, if it's a personal attack, if it's mean-spirited, whatever, or if it's, a lot of cursing in it, that type of thing, that's just ignorant, you're blocked. There's no second chance. I'm not dealing with it anymore. Life's too short. That doesn't mean you have to agree with everything I do. You don't have to, feed my ego and say, I love how you did such and so. I mean, if you disagree with something, you can say you disagree with something. I don't have a problem with that. Just do it nicely. Just do it in a business-like manner. No problem. I've often said there's a million ways to do everything. And you're welcome to do it your way. If what I mention in my video helps you, that's what I'm here for. If it doesn't help you, no harm done, But if you're going to be personally attacking me or just being totally ignorant or just making really nasty comments, whatever, then you're just out of here. And I'm not dealing with it anymore, period. Okay, off that soapbox. So why do I think this might be one of the most valuable shop talks I've done? Because I'm going to talk about setup in general terms. We'll get into some specifics, but we're going to talk about how to approach setups and what to do, when you get that instrument in the shop, the way I do it. Doesn't mean you have to do it this way. This is how I do it. I'm going to talk about some of the things that I think you need, some things I don't think you need at all. And some people just get on me because I don't do it or don't have it. And I'll tell you why I don't think you need it at all and don't need to do it at all. So that's kind of the gist of this. One of the first things that I take heat on all the time is, you didn't check to see that the fretboard itself was level. You know, you're just looking at the frets. Well, if the frets are level, you can set up your action perfectly fine. It doesn't matter, and I'm obviously exaggerating, but it doesn't matter if your fretboard does this. If your frets are level across the top of all of that, you can still make a perfect setup. You know, so when I say I don't care, weigh what I'm saying here, guys. I don't mean like it's never important. What I'm saying is it's just not as important as the tops of the frets. The fretboard itself, whether the fretboard is perfectly level or not, has almost nothing to do with your actual setup. So to me, I look down the fretboard like this. There is no straighter line than line of sight. Nothing you can do is straighter than that. You can put the straightest straight edge in the world on there, and it ain't any straighter than your line of sight. So I look down that fretboard and I go, okay, this one's flat. It's pretty easy to tell that. If it's not flat, if it does this, you know, if it's got the big whoopty in it, I go, this one's not flat. It's just about that simple. The problem is determining the problem. You're going to see a couple of instruments. It just so happens that this kind of coincides with two instruments that I'm just finished working on. One of them is a Guild guitar. The customer can lead you astray so easily. I hope this becomes a life lesson for everybody watching this, that you don't lead your repair person astray by diagnosing the problem for them. It's good to tell them what the problem is, or the symptoms, I guess, or something, but don't diagnose what the whole issue is and try to tell, because that already puts it in their mind. They have a mindset then. Just like if you take your car into your auto mechanic, the car won't start, the battery's dead, I'm sure the alternator's the problem. You're probably going to be paying for a new alternator because that's what he heard. He think, you know, and if nothing else, he's going to get you for the cost of it and put some extra money in his pocket, if nothing else. Don't go in there like that. Just go in there and say, this car battery keeps running down. I don't know what the problem is. That's much better. Then he has to figure it out. That's the same way this Guild guitar came into my shop. The customer came in, and I'm not picking on the customer, don't get me wrong. That's not the issue. I'm talking about the mindset that it creates in my head. That's what I'm talking about. So the customer comes in and says, this guitar is going to need a neck reset. The pickguard has shrunk and it has caused cracks down the top of the guitar. It's going to need a new pickguard as well. The action is so crazy high you can't play it, so you're going to have to reset the neck. You know, those are the kinds of comments that were being made. Well, I look at it and I got to be honest, first thought I had was, boy, this thing definitely needs a neck reset. I looked down it, and I'm not exaggerating. This had a S curve in it. In other words, it's got the hump where it comes over the body there, then it goes down, then it goes back up, and like that. It literally had an S in it. Not so huge that it didn't look like an S you would write, but you know what I'm saying. It did this, and it, you know, and you could look down the fretboard and see it plainly. And when you look at the flat of the top, then the end of the neck was high. And I thought, boy, it definitely needs a neck reset. She's right there. Well, she wasn't right. But it had that in my head because that's what she said and because that was my first impression. But after it sat here for a few months, because I couldn't work on it right then, when I get it out, now I'm looking at it with fresh eyes. And I look down it and I see that and I'm thinking, what would cause that? That don't look right. the neck angle, I got to looking at the neck angle itself, and I'm thinking, the first part of that neck angle looks pretty good. But then that thing starts to peel up like this out here on the end. It's not so much the back of the neck angle. The neck angle there looks pretty good. So in my own head, then I'm going, I'll bet that truss rod is really loose. That's what I think might be the issue. So sure enough, I take the truss rod cover off, and the truss rod was crazy loose. And 30 years of just pulling up on that neck had created that weird shape. So I made sure all the strings were off of it. I tightened up the truss rod as much as I could. I even put pressure on it, as I'm tightening the truss rod to kind of pull that down. And it pulled it down. And I'm going, well, this ain't too bad. Now it's got little bitty whoopties down the neck. It's not this. Now it's just a little bit of a whoopty down the neck, and I'm looking down there going, well, that ain't too bad. I can file through that. And when I say file through, what I'm talking about is there enough fret height there, fret thickness, if you will. The top of the fret has to be thick enough that you could file the high spots off and leave the low spots and get it perfectly level. Once you do that, you're good. Doesn't really matter what the rest of the fretboard's doing unless it's extreme. There's always exceptions, guys. Everything I say has exceptions. I'm talking in general terms here today. So it doesn't matter what the rest of the fretboard's doing. Therein lies the tool that people get on me and say, you don't have such and so tool. You need one of those straight edges that has notches for the frets that you can lay on there to see that fretboard's level. And I would simply just ask the question, why? Because I don't care. I seriously don't care that the fretboard is perfectly level. Again, extremes are different situations. I'm not talking extremes. 99% of the instruments out there are not extremes, okay? So we're talking the general rule of thumb. I seriously don't care. I think that's another one of those marketing hype gimmick things that people have bought into. I haven't had one of those for 40 years, and I seriously do not feel like I've missed one thing. Just telling you like it is. It's my opinion. I'm welcome to my own opinion. You don't have to agree with it. Now, I know I've just kind of pissed off or at least made them very sad for having purchased one of those if you own one of those. I'm sorry, it's not like it's a horrible tool. There's nothing wrong with using the tool. I'm not negatively talking about the tool. I'm just saying I don't think you really need it because that's not the important issue. The important issue is the tops of the frets. Okay, I hope I beat that to death enough. The top of the fret is what you care about, not so much the fretboard, although it can be important under extreme circumstances like that gild. That brings me to the next thing. It's the truss rod. The truss rod is the most abused thing there is in stringed instruments, period. There's nothing that's more screwed up and more abused than that. You've heard me saying, more or less in jest, in comments and videos, I almost wish instruments didn't have truss rods. It's because people screw them up one way or the other. In that case of the gild, they had loosened that one up for some reason. I have no idea why. In other extreme cases, people think the truss rod adjusts the action. And while this is semantics to a large degree, it's semantics, it still is a fact, and that is the truss rod does not adjust your action. Not, N-O-T, it does not adjust your action. It affects your action. There's a difference. You adjust your action at the nut and you adjust your action at the saddle. What you do with the truss rod can affect your action. In the extreme case, not the norm case, the extreme case of this gild that had been pulled up forever, in the extreme case of that, what the effect of the truss rod did was, keep in mind, the neck angle here is fine, but that extreme pulling that down, now the neck angle's fine, see? That's what that was extreme. That was extreme. It wasn't the norm. And certainly that did adjust the action, if you want to call it that. More really what it did, again, I still stand by my statement, is that it affected the action. You let it bring it down. Now you can adjust the action properly at both ends, which I did after I tightened up that truss rod. Do not adjust it thinking you're going to, change the angle of the neck of the guitar. You're not going to change the angle of the neck of your guitar. Here's what a truss rod does. And I'm exaggerating, and there are a million different kinds of truss rods. I'm just talking about kind of the average, kind of the norm. Your truss rod is laid in your neck like this with an underbow. When you tighten the truss rod here, it straightens it out. That's all it does. It doesn't change the angle this way. In the extreme case here, it changed the angle because I told you the end of the neck was way up. The rest of the neck was fine. It pulled that neck down in that case. But that was an extreme case. Ordinarily, all we're talking about is relief, and you're just tightening it up or loosening it to get relief or not have relief. Either way, and some people like flat neck, some people like relief. Me personally, I'm more in the flat neighborhood. I don't think relief does a whole lot for you personally. Very little relief is fine, but when you get into a lot of relief, I think you got a problem. So anyway, that's what a truss rod does, is it adjusts your relief, which affects your action. Your action is adjusted here and it's adjusted here. This just affects it, period. Again, there's nothing more abused and more misused than the truss rod. Getting into a little bit more of the fine points of adjusting the action. It's like, which came first, chicken or the egg? What should you do first? Well, you kind of got to do them both a little bit at the same time. Let's say both of them are crazy high. Well, maybe you want to lower both the nut and the saddle a little bit to get them more in the ballpark. What's in the ballpark? Well, since you're shooting for 18 thousandths here, maybe twice that, 35 thousandths or something down here. You're shooting for maybe 90 thousandths at the 12th fret. So if you're up at 20 thousandths or something presently, you're probably in the ballpark enough. Those sound like big differences, 120 thousandths to 90, that's 30 thousandths of an inch. That's not very much when you start looking at it. I mean, it's like tiny amount. It's very small. So, get those numbers in your head as to understanding what they mean. When you're up here at 18 thousandths at your, say on your large E string over the first fret, and you say, well, I don't like it that high. That's way too high. I want it down to 15 thousandths. That's 3 thousandths of an inch. That's just a hair more than half of a hair. Take a hair and split it in half. That's pretty small. You think it's big. You hear these numbers and you think they're huge. They're not. They're tiny. So don't let those numbers screw up your brain. I've had customers say, 100,000, I want it 90. That's 10 thousandths too much. 10 thousandths. Take two hairs and stack them on top of each other. It's not much. It's really not much. Okay. Just get that concept in your head, first of all, what kind of numbers you're dealing with before you get all uptight about it. The second thing is, you're probably going to want to get your action pretty close at your bridge before you set your action all the way down at the nut. Because if you get it all the way down, let's say that you're 10 thousandths on your little E, maybe that's what you want on your first fret. Well, if the saddle is still really high and you have to drop it a lot, well, now your 10 thousandths is maybe only 6 thousandths, because you had to drop this so much. So that's why I say you want to kind of get them in the ballpark. I wouldn't adjust the nut to its final specs until you're pretty comfortable that the saddle is just about where you want it. A little more adjustment at the nut isn't going to affect your 12th fret very much. But a lot of adjustment at the saddle could affect your first fret quite a bit. So I hope you see what comes first, the chicken or the egg there. Try to get them approximately in the ballpark before you start doing your fine tuning. Fine tune your saddle pretty close before you really do your ultra fine tuning of your first fret. Then if you need to adjust the saddle some more, you can do that, but then you should only be making smaller adjustments and it won't affect your first fret that much. But a large adjustment at the saddle can affect that first fret if you've already got it down to where you want it. I hope that makes sense. So that's very important in my opinion when doing setups. The common sense thing that I always say is do the easy thing first. Do the simple thing first. Don't do the hardest part first. Just like on that guild, had I gone to the extreme of doing a neck reset, that would have been a total waste. Just a total waste of money, time, effort that would have cost the customer a ton of money. I'm not saying I'm a hero because I figured out a way to fix it without. My point is always look and see, are there alternatives? Is there a simpler way to think about this? Sometimes it's best to just lay it down, walk away from it, let your mind clear, come back, look at it again. Always do the simple thing first. Let me give you another real life example of something that just happened this last weekend. And this, again, it's kind of like setting the mindset of the repair technician when you take your car in. So this is kind of not about instruments, this is about mechanical stuff, but it relates to anything in life, instruments or anything. My wife's lawn tractor has been giving us trouble for a year or two on starting. It's been sporadic, but you hear that click, click, click when you try to start it. And if you mechanics out there are instantly going, to the solenoid or the starter or that type of thing, and it's a very likely cause. Or it could be a poor connection on your battery. Even a weak battery can cause it. All right, so this has been happening for quite a long time, and to be honest, I just hadn't devoted the time to really get in and fix it. I would go out and clean the terminals, I would charge the battery up, and she'd be good and cut the grass and everything would be fine. My wife likes to cut grass, by the way. That's one of her favorite things. Go figure. That's why I married her. I drove around the neighborhood looking for a girl that liked to cut grass, and I said, would you marry me? And she did. And I've tried to keep the lawn tractor working ever since. Well, I realized I had put it off too much this time, and I finally just said, I'm going to figure out what the real problem is with this tractor. I guarantee if you took it anywhere and you said to the mechanic, this thing won't start, it keeps clicking, I'm pretty sure the solenoid or the starter's bad, I'll guarantee you're going to be buying a new solenoid and a new starter, because that's the first thing they heard, and that's the easy thing for them, and they are going to make more money because they're going to sell you that part in addition. So you've just bought a starter and a solenoid. However, if you took it in the other way and you said, I don't know what's wrong with this, it just clicks when I try to start it, you still might have bought a solenoid and a starter, truthfully, in that situation. But at least they have to figure it out. Here's what actually happened, just in case you're wondering. Again, this is about applying this logic to instruments. You always do the simple thing first. So what are the simple things? Clean the terminals. I cleaned every connection that had anything to do with anything. Where it connected to the starter, where it connected to the solenoid, where it connected to the battery. I cleaned all the connections. Made sure they were all perfect, made sure they were all tight. I even put the electrolytic grease on there. I forget the name of that stuff right now. I know it, but I can't think of it. Anyway, I put that on there too, just in case, to make sure that it was making good contact. That didn't fix it. Still same problem. The next logical thing, of course, is you make sure your battery's good. So I, used a meter to check the battery. Meter tested the battery perfect. So nothing wrong with the battery. Well, okay, ruled that out. So then the next thing I did was I took the solenoid and the starter off the tractor entirely. Brought them in here on my bench, and I tested each one individually. They both worked perfectly. Okay, it's not a connection, it's not the battery, it's not the solenoid, it's not the starter. Then why won't it start? I mean, it's a head scratcher. But I guarantee you, if you'd have taken that someplace else, my son tried to talk me into taking it somewhere, and I said, no. I said, I'm not going to do it because I have a feeling it's not any of those things. Now, you can, under those circumstances, you can start to make yourself think that it's got to, well, maybe it's just that old starter, it just ain't got the power, maybe it's the solenoid, it just ain't got the power, it's old, and let's replace it just to see. Well, I didn't do that. I almost did that, I got to admit, I almost did that because I'm thinking I've tested everything, everything's working. Went to lunch. Again, this is where you lay your instrument down if you're going to repair something, and you just lay it down and you go away from it. Let your mind clear. While I was eating my lunch and answering comments and emails, I got to thinking, well, what else could there be that could cause something like this? And I started thinking, it's got all that safety crud on there. And I mean, this thing is loaded with safety crud. It's got you got to have it in the right gear thing. It's a hydrostatic transmission, and it doesn't really have gears, but you got to have those arms in the right place. It's a zero turn. You got to have them exactly in the right place or it won't start. You got to be sitting in the seat or it won't start. You got to have the PTO off or it won't start. You got to have the park brake on or it won't start. And there's another one or two also. It won't start if you don't have all of these things. And I thought, that's probably the problem. It's some stupid little switch. So I wanted to test all those switches, and I thought, man, you can't even get to them. They hide them. They don't want you messing with those things, and they're really hard to get to on this tractor in particular. So I thought, well, I got to find a different way around that because I'm not taking all of this thing apart to try to get to those stupid switches. So I got to thinking, and the old country boy ingenuity says, let's just find a way to bypass it. Well, again, they make those things so complicated, there's safety built into the safety, and you can't hardly bypass most of it. So I thought, well, rather than fight it, I'll join it. So what I did was I just put an extra switch in next to the key switch. So now you have to turn the key on, and then you just push a push button starter. Instead of using the key to start it, I don't do that. I just turn the key on and push a button to start it. I bypassed all the stuff, went straight to the solenoid, starts right up every time now. No problem at all. So I hope you understand my point. My point isn't so much that I wanted to tell you about my tractor. My point is, don't set the mind up of the person you're taking something to repair it, because I guarantee you, you're screwing yourself when you do that. That's the first thing. I guarantee it. It doesn't matter what it is. If you take it someplace and you already have the problem diagnosed, you've just cost yourself money. I guarantee you. You may still pay it anyway, because if you get an incompetent repair guy, he's going to just trial and error test all that stuff and buy all new stuff anyway. And then as the repair guy, think about things logically. Don't get in too big a hurry to just jump in and do the big thing first. Check all the easy stuff first, build up, and then you can always do the big thing if you can't get the little things to work. I hope that makes sense to you. To me, that's the best advice I can give anybody on working on instruments, right there. Well, now we'll get into viewer comments, questions, answers, and just viewer mail in general. The first thing I've got is from Sean Burchett in High Point, North Carolina. Sean, thank you for sending me this. For those of you who can't see it very well, there you go. It's pickguard material, and we affectionately call this mother of toilet seat. And for those young whippersnappers out there who still don't have any idea what I'm talking about, back in the 50s, 60s, a lot of toilet seats were made out of material that looked just like that. It's kind of crazy that they did that. Somebody thought that was a good idea. I don't know why, but anyway, they did. And they were made out of that kind of thing. So Sean says, I'm an avid watcher of your videos on YouTube. I'm a guitar collector from High Point, North Carolina, with about 153 guitars. Sean, I don't know if you know this. some people would call that a hoarder. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. You can't have too many guitars. Anyway, he says, funny thing is, I'm a rocker by nature. I've only listened to bluegrass a few times in my life. I only have 3 acoustic guitars in my collection, but I'm so intrigued by watching you fix guitars that you do. I'm doing my best to learn how to build my own line of electric guitars, but I figure that it's never a bad thing to learn about all kinds of guitars. Well, I agree with you there. Quite honestly, I don't do very much on electric guitars. I'm kind of the exact opposite, but I know my way around an electric guitar, and I can fix them if I have to. I mean, like, the electronics are not that daunting to me. I'm not saying I do it as efficiently or proficiently as someone who does it every day would do it, but I can get it done, you know. So I understand that. And I understand your point. He said, in my buying of electric guitar supplies, I accidentally purchased 2 sets of these pick guards, and I have no real use for them. So he figured he would pass them on to me. Well, thank you, Sean. They may come in handy. You never know. The next thing that walks through the door, I may need them for that. So you just don't know. And it's like you said, it's not a bad thing to have it in your arsenal and to just put it in on the shelf there. And one of these days, it may be the thing I need. So thank you, Sean. Thank you for watching my videos. Thank you for the nice remarks. Friends, my next email is from Val Earl. Val is a lady rancher out in the, I'm pretty sure it's Idaho. I may have missed the state. She told me before, but I get confused. I talk to so many people. Captain John Creek apparently is the area she's in, and I think it's Idaho, but I'm not so sure about that. Anyway, she must have a pretty big spread, or at least a big area that she overseas with her cattle and stuff. She's always on horseback and sending me pictures. You can see the horse's ears through some of the pictures sometimes, and they're beautiful scenery. So her letter says, "Hi, Mr. Rosa. Thank you for the nice video of you and your granddaughter singing. That was a peaceful end to our frazzling day." She says, "I cannot sing for you in return, but I'm sending you some pictures of spring, and I'm sure Melissa will input a couple of those here." I'm going to skip down in the email and this is the part that I thought was amusing, and I think you'll find amusing as well. It says, "The trail to my summer pastures has had a lot of washouts." And she says, "The biggest one so far is exactly 1 horse deep." I thought that was really cute. And you know, when I get a washout here on my driveway, it's about ankle deep typically. So 1 horse deep, that's a little bit bigger than my typical washout here. So I can appreciate it though. And sometimes on our county road, we get some that are pretty close to a 1 horse deep. I'd say at least belly deep on a horse sometimes. Well, so thank you, Val, for sending that, keeping me amused like that. I appreciate it. So the next one is a shout out to Roel Muller, and that's Roelmuller, and he's in the Netherlands. So I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and I apologize there, sir. But thank you for the nice note. He just says, "I just wanted to say I really enjoy your videos, especially the series about the acoustic guitar. I felt your pain from time to time, but you kept going, and the result was amazing." So thank you very much, Roel Muller. Again, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, but thank you for watching my videos, and thank you for the nice comment there. The next email is from David Strozier, and David sent me photos of his father's mandolin, apparently, that had all kinds of issues. And unfortunately, I'm not able to help with that because of just having such a huge backlog. But David went on to make a suggestion about my bridge heater. He said that he noticed that, I'm having to turn the bridge heater up on end to heat the ends of the bridge, and that I should just add wings onto it, to heat it all at once. The only problem with that, and it's a good idea, don't get me wrong, it really is. It's just, if I had some way to make it easily adjustable, And I could kind of think of a way, I guess, but you know, it's just that it won't touch all at the, you know, in other words, all bridges aren't created equal. They're not all the same shape, and the middle is not always the same height relative to the ends. So if you make it out of aluminum and you make it one shape, well, the next bridge it won't fit, you know. And so that's the problem with it. Now you could put some adjustments on the ends where you could slide that up and down. I know that could be done. I'm just not sure it's worth the effort, and I'm not sure that the heat would transfer well enough anyway. So I think I'll just leave it the way it is for now, but it is a good idea. I mean, it would be perfect if you were doing exactly the same kind of bridge every time, then for sure it would be the way to go. No question about that. But David, I appreciate you watching my videos. He says he watches one almost every evening, and he stumbled across them by accident about a month ago, he said. So David, thank you so much for watching, and good luck to you. I hope you're able to get that instrument fixed and get it back in service. This next email is from David Green, and David had sent a question about fixing the hump, you know, the belly bulge type problem behind the bridge there, or at the bridge. And he said that the bridge plate in his was big enough and thick enough, he felt, but there was still a big hump there. Well, I'm not sure what the real problem is there, but, you know, assuming that everything else is okay, and bridge and the bridge plate and the bell, you know, and the top of the guitar are all bowed, a lot of people would say just humidify it, it'll come back. No, I don't believe that, I'm sorry. And even if it did come back a little bit, as soon as you put strings on it, it's going to pull it back in there. That's my experience. I'm sticking to that because that's my experience. I don't think you can fix that unless you do it mechanically. One way would be with that bridge doctor. You could pull it down. There's no question you can pull it down with the bridge doctor. That thing works really good. But I don't personally like what it does to your sound. Keep in mind what the bridge doctor does is it attaches right to the most vibrational point of your instrument, and it pulls it down, and it just kind of locks it from vibrating at that point. I mean, it really does, and I certainly hear the difference. Now, some people, you know, recently commented that, you know, it makes a difference on a real good guitar, but not so much on a cheap guitar. Well, maybe that's true, but to my ear, it makes a difference, and that's I'm sticking to that. How else can you fix that? Well, he doesn't want to remove the bridge plate. He thinks it's, you know, a good bridge plate. Well, I guess I'd argue that and probably say, well, I don't think the bridge plate's that good if it let it bow up that much. So my answer to him is, if you're just gonna put another plate over that, well then I would make sure, number one, that it's a good quality hardwood that doesn't like to bend. Like the Padauk is a good example there. I keep going to that, but that's a wood that doesn't like to bend, and it's very resonant. It vibrates very good. I don't think you can make a much better choice for a bridge plate, in my opinion. So I would make sure that the wood is quarter sawn. I would use a very non-bending type wood like the Padauk. And I would also turn the grain at a 45 to the other grains. Typically, your top, the grain runs the length of the top. Okay, so that's pretty much a given. The grain on the bridge plate generally runs perpendicular to that. So let's just assume that that's the way they put it in there. So you've got one going this way, one going that way. Well, the new bridge plate, I would put at a 45 so that none of those grains line up. And then I would make sure you take a good flat board, lay it across the top of the guitar, clamp it on the edges there so that that flat, good flat, solid, heavy board pushes that top back down, holds it flat. You know, if you need to use those squeeze rubbery clamps, you know, the ones with the rubber pads, you squeeze them and you squeeze them, and you just keep taking it down until that guitar top is perfectly flat. Then you put your bridge plate in and you clamp it between a good thick caul on the inside and that thick board on the outside, and everything's good and flat, and you clamp it up there good and flat. That'll give you your best chance of keeping that bow out of there. If you want to humidify it while you're doing that, fine, go ahead and do that. That'd be okay too. I don't have any real problem with the humidification thing. It's just that I personally do not think that's a permanent fix. It's just a temporary Band-Aid in my opinion. But that might help you get it flat easier too. So that's a possibility. But anyway, that's how I would do it, is I would mechanically fix it. I don't think you can fix those kinds of things unless you do a mechanical fix. The Bridge Doctor is the easy mechanical fix, but I think you pay for that in sound. The other fix is much more difficult, but I think your sound will be okay if you do it that way with a good resonant wood like that. So I hope that helps you, David Green. Thank you for the comment. Mark D. Gennaro. I'm not sure how to pronounce that last name. Mark Digennaro. So Mark, he said he stumbled across my videos a few days ago and he's viewed a few of them, especially on the Alvarez guitars. He said none of them had the patented direct coupled bridge found on many of the upper level Alvarez guitars. What do you think of those bridges? I'm embarrassed to say this because I say it all the time. I truly am not that guy. I don't know all the models. There are hundreds, there's dozens of models with each maker, and there are hundreds of makers. And I am not the guy that keeps that in my head. I seriously don't even know, honestly, which bridge you're talking about unless I were to Google it. If you don't think I'm humble, I'm telling you right up there, right in front of you right now, that I don't know. I just don't know. And when I don't know, I just tell you that. I just don't know. So I can't really comment on that, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because I seriously don't know which bridge we're talking about. I've probably seen it. I just don't know which one we're talking about. Sorry. But thank you for watching my videos. Thank you for the comment. And thank you for embarrassing me. You didn't embarrass me, I embarrassed myself. Melissa put a note in here that I should talk about my training and how it applies to the other stringed instruments. The reason is because a lot of people have asked similar questions. They're all about different instruments. Like somebody will ask about the dulcimer, somebody will ask about the banjo, somebody will ask about something else. Do I think my training would help with those things? Well, the answer is a yes and a no. It's a definite yes that I think it would help you. But on the other hand, the no side of it is it's not specifically about those instruments. If you're trying to learn more about music in general, you know, I would encourage you to buy a cheap mandolin, go through my training, understand that mandolin training, you know, go through it until you get it down. You'll be miles ahead. I mean, I hate to brag on it that much, but seriously, you'll be miles ahead. And, you know, then you can go back to your dulcimer and you'll understand your dulcimer much better. My bet is once you learn the mandolin, you'll think it's so much fun, you won't even go back to the dulcimer. That's what my thought is, to be perfectly honest with you. As a matter of fact, the boy who plays for Doyle Lawson, this is a true story, I promise you, 100% true. His name is Joe Dean. He's been with Doyle for quite a while now. He started with Daly and Vincent right out of high school. I gave Joe lessons on the mandolin when he was 11 years old. But anyway, he came up to me at a little show I was doing over in Illinois, and he introduced himself to me. And it turns out we're actually related through marriage type of deal. So he introduced himself that way, and he said that he's 11 years old now, keep in mind. He's already the Illinois State Champion dulcimer player. And I thought, wow, well, you know, I'm just being truthful. I'm not a huge fan of the dulcimer, of the lap dulcimer. I really kind of like the hammer dulcimer, but the lap dulcimer just doesn't trip my trigger that much. So I wasn't expecting too much. He sits down on this dulcimer, whips up on it like ain't nobody I ever saw whip up on a dulcimer. I mean, this boy could play this dulcimer, and I'm not exaggerating. He whipped up on it and got my attention. And he asked me if I would show him something on the mandolin. Well, one of the tunes he played on the dulcimer was Old Joe Clark. So I started showing him Old Joe Clark and the mandolin, and I showed him some of the basics and things, and he just got it like that. Musical genius, no question about it. The reason I got off on this tangent was I said, now, Joe, once I show you how to play this mandolin, I said, you'll be throwing rocks at that dulcimer. So several years later now, after he's been playing with Daly and Vincent for quite a while, I saw Joe at a show and I said, okay, Joe, tell me honestly, how often do you play the dulcimer? He goes, I never touch it anymore. Of course, he moved on from the mandolin to banjo, so he mostly plays banjo now. I just thought that was kind of a cute story, that he's 11 years old, and I told him, I said, after I teach you how to play this mandolin, son, you'll throw rocks at that dulcimer. and it's sort of true, because he never really did play the dulcimer much after that. But my point is, about the training, just get you a cheap mandolin, go ahead and get my training for the mandolin, go through it. I promise you it will pay off in spades for you. It really will. Even if you don't play the mandolin. I mean, if you just decide, well, you'll learn so much about the music and the concept of the chording and all of that will apply back to your dulcimer, or it will apply back to your banjo or your guitar or whatever. You can apply the mandolin training back to your guitar. I have separate guitar training. The guitar training, though, is after you already know your chords and things, where the mandolin training takes you from how to hold the pick, literally, to how to play the most complicated song. So the mandolin training is all-inclusive. The guitar training is not all-inclusive. It's just about the Nashville number system on the guitar. So yes, I do think that the training can help you with any instrument, but the way I would approach it would be to just get a cheap mandolin, a $50 mandolin, whatever it takes to learn, to go through the training, and then more than likely you'll like the mandolin so much you won't ever play the other instrument anyway. Okay, the next one is from the UK, and this fella's name is E&R Kwiatkowski. It's Kwiatkowski. Kwiatkowski, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, but anyway, I'll be glad to answer your question here. And I'm really glad you brought this one up, because it's something I want to clarify, because I've seen several comments, and I think there's a misunderstanding based on the comments of what I said, and I want to clarify what I said. It says, I live in the UK. I enjoy watching your instrument repair videos. I was interested in your comments about the black Martin pickguards and your observation that certain polishes cause them to curl up. Now, I'm not even going through the rest of his comment, because I just want to talk about that. And the reason I want to talk about it is because I stand by what I said, but I want to be very clear. It's not just Martin guitars that has this problem. I've seen pickguards curl up on all kinds of guitars. All kinds. As a matter of fact, that Guild was another example that I mentioned in the first part of this. That pickguard had curled up on that. Pickguards curl up on all kinds of them, whether they're black or not. Now, I will tell you, on that fairly recent Martin guitar where I fixed that big crack in the back and the pickguard had come and we took the pickguard off of it, I probably made a mistake on that one, in that I should have gone ahead and finished the area under the pickguard before I put the new pickguard back down. Martin had a thing there in early days of this, in the early 70s, 80s, somewhere in there, where they were putting the pickguards directly on the wood. And then people said they finished over those pickguards, and I guess they did. I haven't really seen what I would say pickguards that were finished over. Typically, if that's the case, when you peel that pickguard off, that finish is going to crack and stuff, and I don't see any cracking, so I don't think that had finish over it. Maybe it did, maybe I'm wrong. If it did, their finish really attached well. And maybe the finish itself is part of the reason it curled up, because I'm telling you, chemicals on that kind of plastic is not a good combination. I stand by what I said. You will never change my mind on that. I've seen it too many times. Do not put any kind of chemicals on your plastic pickguards. And it is not limited to Martin guitars. That's the thing I wanted to clarify, because so many people were making it out like it's just a Martin thing that it happens on because they didn't put finish under their pickguard. I see it on all brands of guitars where they've used the liquid polishes on top of the pickguard. So, very clear on that. I hope that clears the air on that. It's got nothing to do with Martin whatsoever. Martin has a real issue there. A lot of those pick guards that were put on those bare wood instruments did curl up, did come loose, did cause cracking, etc. But that's a separate issue compared to what I'm talking about with the chemicals on the pick guards that cause the pick guards to curl up. To my friend here in the UK, since I can't pronounce your last name, and the initials are just E and R, so I thank you for the comment there and for bringing that up so that I could address it. I hope that clarifies it for you. Well, I apologize because E and R, I just found your first name and it's Eric. So Eric, thank you so much for that note. Mike Mullins from Windsor, Ontario. And that reminds me, the Canada Mandolin, the name, by far the most common suggestion was the maple leaf mandolin. It's got a ring to it. I think I'll just go with that. I know some people said maple leaf is overused, had all kinds of good suggestions, but that's just a simple name and it's got a ring to it. So I think that's what we'll call it, the maple leaf mandolin. Mike says, I've been watching a number of your videos, including the D35 crack repair, the custom guitar build, and current shop talk. He says, I am sure that I am one of thousands who tune in primarily because of the way you present the narrative. Like a storyteller, you lay down the bear, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything in between. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mike, and thank you for your comments here. Mike also sent me a cool video, and maybe Melissa could put a link to it, of these guys picking up a Canadian Pacific railway station, moving the whole rail. It's a huge building, picking up the whole thing, turning it around, and moving it to a new place and new foundation. I've seen a lot of those kinds of big building moves in the past, and I've done small building moves myself. In fact, a bit of trivia that I'm sure no one here knows is that my very first house was about, the house itself I think was 24 by 30, but the foundation was 24 by 36. This house was actually built on a hillside, and the front of the house was off the ground. It was built on pillars. I jacked up the whole house, held it in place. In other words, I didn't lift it, I just held it in place with jacks and timbers and things. And I dug out the hole underneath the house, built a concrete foundation underneath the house, dug it all out by hand, by the way. Dug it all, dug all the footings and everything by hand, laid all the block. I used concrete block to lay it because it would have been very difficult to pour it. Although pouring it would have been an option, but I was very poor at the time. So laying up individual concrete blocks, I could buy those as I could afford them and just build it over a long, slow period of time. What was sad is that only just a couple of months after I finished that whole project and got the bedrooms and everything finished in the basement, it really turned out very nice. Had a walkout basement, the whole bit. Ended up selling the whole place. Wasn't much more than a month or two after I finished the whole project. So then we had to move, find another place. That was just a bit of trivia, didn't cost you any extra. But Mike, thank you for your nice compliments and thanks for that video clip. That was a good one. I promised several people I would talk about my intonation rig. This is just a coat hanger wire. It's nothing more complicated than that. It hangs on the end pin of the strap button, if you want to call it that, on the guitar. You have to put leather in here, padding, or leather and leather on the top, or whatever, or some kind of padding. It doesn't have to be leather, but just something to keep it from pulling into the side of the guitar and making a scratch or mark. You also need to put something right under here. The strings just attach in these little hooks that I bent. This is just a spreader to keep it apart, because if you don't have the spreader there to keep it apart, the string will pull together and they'll come together. So it's just the way I made it. You can make it a bunch of different ways. I'm sure you could do better than this. This has just worked for me for a long time. I don't even know how long ago I made this. It works, so I just use it. I'm sure I can make one way better, much more improved than this now, but it works. And so that's what I use. That's all it is. It's just coat hanger wire. The reason I did it this way is so you can slide the ball in behind that little hook there. You know, it just slides in behind there. And same way on that side. Nothing more to it than that. That's my intonation rig. That allows you to float the bridge and float the saddle until you get it just right. Or sometimes it's just, you know, like if I've already got the bridge glued down, I just float the saddle before I cut the slot. Some people ask me, why do you do it that way? Why don't you cut the slot in it before you put it on the instrument? Well, you can do that too. But like on that custom guitar I built, I floated both of them, because I wanted to make sure that the bridge was, square and that it was centered. And, like if you just arbitrarily cut a slot in that bridge, it might be that to get the perfect intonation, I'd have to turn the bridge a little bit cockeyed. It wouldn't be square to the top. See, by doing it the way I did it, it allowed me to align everything perfectly by eye, that it looked good, So that's why I did it that way. There's a million ways to do everything. Not necessarily the easiest way to do it, you understand. I always, put that caveat in there. It may not be the easiest way to do it, but it's the way I do it because of certain reasons, and that's the reason. Okay, I wanted to talk, I've got a whole list of things I just wanted to talk about. And saddle notches. People, ask me, should you have notches in your saddle? Well, generally speaking, on fixed saddles, no. On things that don't move, no. On movable saddles, yes. It's kind of weird, but that's the way it is. Like, in other words, on archtop guitars that have a floating saddle up there that could move around, typically you need to have notches. And the reason is it keeps the string separated. If you don't have notches, they'll squeeze together, they'll move, all that kind of stuff. So you need notches in that case. On a fixed bridge where it's glued down and it goes through the holes, well, that pretty much holds it in place, and you do not need notches. And I would prefer you didn't put notches in a saddle like that. I hope that clarifies it. On mandolins, you need notches, on archtop guitars where the bridge and saddle are floating, you need notches. All right, so people talk about my router base, and they see this white base, and they see the small hole. Well, I did have a larger V thing, but the problem with that is it doesn't always sit flat on something. This gives me a better surface to move it around, and it typically won't fall off or catch on that V or whatever. So I like that. People say, well, you should make this clear. I did have it clear originally, and I hated it because that clear plastic has a natural static ability to it, and it just attracts sawdust like crazy, and it just sticks, and you can't see through it anyway. And in addition, those clear plastics scratch really easy, and there's no time before you can't see through it anyway. If you think about the way I use this, I'm not routing big areas. I'm routing little bitty tiny areas. I don't need a very big hole. I get bright light on that, and I'm really focused on that little tiny spot that I'm routing. So this works perfect for me. I mean, it might not work for you, but it works perfect for me. I really like it. It's the best thing I ever did to a router base. I don't even use it hardly anymore because I'm using this one. It's very similar though. I like this one for the adjustability. This is a very good router base, but it's not terribly easy to adjust. I mean, you can adjust it and it's not that hard. I've gotten used to it over the years, but this one's even easier to adjust. And so I like this base better. This tool, I don't really like this tool as much as I like my Dremel. My Dremel's a more powerful, better tool in my opinion. The combination of these two things together are perfectly fine. So that's why I do what I do here. That's why I don't have the clear base, just so you know. I've covered this a lot in the past, and I still continually get comments. People continually scold me for not using a sanding block. I've come to this conclusion. There are people who use sanding blocks and people who don't. I'm one of the second. I started watching a lot of videos on artistry type people. Almost none of them use a sanding block, even in doing almost the exact same things I'm doing. They don't use sanding blocks. They use their fingers, and they all say the same thing. I get a better feel with my fingers. I know what it feels like. I know, and that's the way I feel about it. I truly feel not only do I do a better job, but I truly feel I do a faster job with my fingers than I do with a sanding block. In addition, I don't get the buildup on the sandpaper as much, although I get some. I don't get it as much with my fingers as I do when I'm using a block. I'm not going to be using a block except on large open areas. Typically, those are going to be bare wood, not finished wood, for me. Although I will use a block occasionally, even on a finished wood. I'm not opposed to using a block, you understand. I just typically don't use a block. Sorry if it offends you, can't help you there. Even some of the car finishers have chimed in and said, I don't use a block either. I finish by hand on my cars, especially when I get down to the detail sanding, and that kind of thing. And, almost everything I'm doing is detail sanding, if you think about it like that. The next email is from Radu. Sorry, Radu. Radau is his first name, and the last name is Lenasoae. And he is from Romania. Radu, thank you for your comment. He says, I'm from Romania. I just want to thank you for all the great videos out on YouTube. I've watched most of them. I'm pleased to say you have inspired me to buy a Ovation guitar that's seen its better days, and bring it back to life. He says, I also have a brand new Ovation guitar, and I was wondering, should I seal the inside of the guitar with, Renaissance wax or finish or something to prevent it from cracking, which is kind of typical or common on those Ovation guitars. Any ideas or feedback on that? Well, I answered him with my honest opinion, and the honest opinion is, I'm not sure I know, but I would tend not to do it. And the reason I lean that way is because nobody does it. If it was a good idea to finish the inside of a guitar, I am 99.9% positive Martin or Gibson would have figured that out already, and they would have been doing it. Taylor would have figured it out and been doing it. Nobody does that. So I would say if nobody does it, it's probably not a good idea. That's the first logical answer that I have, and the only logical answer I have. The other thing would be from experience, and the experience is this, and I'll just tell you this straight up and down. I never let a customer hear a raw guitar anymore. I did it one time, and it was a mistake. If you play your instrument without a finish on it, you'll never want to put a finish on it. They sound so much better without a finish on them. I'm telling you, I didn't play that last custom guitar without a finish on it, but had I done it, you guys would have thrown rocks at me for putting a finish on that guitar. Seriously, they sound way better without a finish. So that would be my experienced answer from no, don't put a finish on the inside of your guitar. That would be a bad idea. So that's my answer. I'm sticking to it. Hope you like that. I got to chuckle out of this next one because, well, I'll tell you why here in a second. This is from Vasily Nikitin. Again, sorry for the names. I'm sorry, guys. VASILIYNIKITIN. And he is from Russia. He says, sir, thank you for the videos. You do a great job. It's a pleasure to see how you do your work. This is the part I chuckled at. He says, and you have great English. Well, I chuckle because I know I don't. I have my own way of saying things, and I get corrected on my English all the time by the English professors out there, which I try to politely tell them that, sorry, you've wandered into the instrument repair channel. The English speaking channel is just down the hall. So, but I thought that was funny. Coming from Russia, perhaps I do have great English. It's all it's all relative to what you're comparing it to. So I thank you, Vasily. I'm not making fun of you. I truly am not. I appreciate your comment, and I thank you even for the comment about my English, because you're the only one who thinks I have really good English, unfortunately. Anyway, you get all kinds of fun comments, and I get to embarrass myself just left and right. Now, is that not being humble? I mean, have I lost my humility? I'm sorry if I have. Didn't mean to. As far as I can tell, my hat size is still the same. The next one is from Matthew Atkinson. Now, you understand, we get hundreds every week. We only pick out some, of the comments and questions. And this one is just another random one that Melissa picked out. Matthew Atkinson, and he was wondering about how wide do I route the flat spot on a mandolin top. When I'm getting ready to carve a mandolin top, I take a router. At one time, I was using my drill press. I have since just moved to a regular router because almost all the time anymore, the top is so flat that I can actually lay a router on the top and route the outer edges. Now, if your top is not flat, if you've got the wedge there that you're starting with, well, then you can't use a router. You do have to use a drill press method or some other method. But anyway, with a router, he was asking me, how wide do I route the outer edge around the mandolin before I start my carving? And the truthful answer is I never measure it. I make sure I leave at least a full 1/4 inch thickness around the outer edge. And I route it in. I've got a 1/2 inch router bit that I'm using, and I route it in almost 2 full widths of that router bit around. So it's roughly about 1 inch. Give or take a little bit, and you're fine with that because, you got to remember you're going to come down and you're going to go, going to make a little trough there, a marble trace, if you will, and then you're going to come back up. So, you've got more than 1 inch to play with, but I roughly route out about 1 inch around that outer edge. I hope that helps you. Thank you, Matthew, for your question and for watching my videos. Michael Garza, you ask about cleaning your guitar, and to be honest, again, I don't know that I'm the expert on cleaning a guitar, believe it or not. It's not something that I think about too much. Most of the time when I'm doing something that big, I'm, using like semichrome over the whole top, which cleans it automatically, or I'm sanding the whole top, which cleans it automatically, but I don't just sit down to just clean the instrument most of the time. Now, there have been some exceptions. I've had some really nasty guitars, and in those cases, I just typically use a very lightly dampened cloth and maybe some mild soap of some sort and literally wash it. You got to be careful with that because those shellac-based finishes will turn milky white and even melt on you, and you can melt them. The French polish finishes that are finished with shellac will do that, and that's why I don't like French polish. I don't use it. It's a great finish. It's acoustically, it's wonderful. It's just not my cup of tea. I don't use them. This is probably a good idea for cleaning a guitar and polishing a guitar all in one step. It's that Angel Superior blend that I showed in, I believe it was the last Shop Talk. I'm not getting any kickback. I don't get a thing out of this. So you can say what you want to say. I'm just saying it was my first experience with it was in the last video. Dang, it worked pretty darn good. It cleaned the top of that guitar and did a pretty decent job of polishing it also. All in one step. I was also honest and told you that I don't think it did quite as good a job as I could do with the semichrome polish and the Renaissance wax. I think that actually does a little bit better job, but it's way more work. This was at least half the work or less. So this is that Angel Superior Blend polish. They're in Clinton, South Carolina. That would probably be a good way to clean it, at least in one step. I'm sure the just lightly damp cloth and the mild detergent is okay too, as long as it's a lacquer-based type finish or a poly-based type finish, something that's a hard finish that won't absorb the water. If it absorbs the water and it turns it cloudy, you're on your own. I'm warning you to test it in a light spot someplace first. So thank you, Michael, for asking. I appreciate it. Thank you for watching the videos. We're on the last one. Thunderous applause yet again. I got to hear from Warren Morrison. Warren was the fellow who owned the Party Pooper fiddle, if you ever saw that video. In the video, apparently I made mention that we were putting the cheaper strings on it. Well, he was learning to play it and all that, and that was fine. He contacted me again to find out what I thought were the better strings that I would recommend. Now, keep in mind, guys, there's a million different kinds of strings you can put on a violin, and you can pay $400 a set for violin strings. Seriously, I'm not making that up. They are expensive. You can go from, relatively cheap, and even the relatively cheap ones cost more than guitar strings, to really expensive on the other end. So I try to, I try to find the happy medium. What's the logical thing to do here? Well, rather than the real true gut core strings that cost the fortune in the arm and the leg, look for that happy medium somewhere between the solid steel ones, which really sound pretty bad. Somewhere in between there's got to be a happy medium, and hopefully it's toward the less expensive end. I recommend the Diodario Pro Art J56W, and they're called 4/4, so that means full size, 4/4, medium tension, nylon core, aluminum wound E. Aluminum wound E is the key there, because you can buy this same exact string without the aluminum winding on the E. The aluminum winding on the E really tones that E string down where it doesn't have that shrill, high-pitched steel sound. So make sure you get that set with the wound E if you want the best sound. They're a great string, I think. They still set you back a bunch of money these days. I'm going to say you're in the neighborhood of $40 for a set of them. But they last a very long time. Have a great sound. So Warren, that's the one I recommended to Warren, and here's what Warren said about the strings. Today I put on your new recommended strings on the fiddle. The resonance of the G just blew me away. Made me think of a drum sound or a similar sound coming from a wooden barrel. The other strings are crisp as well. It separates my playing screw-ups from the sound quality that was hiding inside the instrument. I can imagine you heard something special in there as well. As I was playing his fiddle with the cheaper strings, I could tell that fiddle would have a really good sound if, it had better strings on it. So, in my opinion, you can't do much better than these strings. Now, I know there are other ones out there. There's Tomastic and various brands that are very, very similar, and I'm sure they'd be fine too. I just got experience with these, and I stand by these. So if you haven't tried them, I would recommend you try the Diodario Pro Art J56W 4/4 medium tension nylon core with the wound E. And the wound E is the key part to that whole thing. That was a mouthful. That was the last one. We're done. Thank you for watching. I hope you got something out of this edition of Shop Talk. Tell your friends.